I'm in Los Angeles, a city known for Hollywood, beaches, glitz, and glam. What's less known, though, is that oil helped make LA what it is today. Oil derricks used to tower over Los Angeles. And today, there are still thousands of active pump jacks in LA County, often extracting oil close to homes and parks in underserved communities. That's what you can see. What you can't see are the old deserted wells. Hundreds of them remain scattered underground across LA. They're unplugged and potentially leaking toxic gases.
It looked almost like a coffin at first. I saw a ton of gas being emitted.
For over a century, oil companies have neglected to properly plug their wells, and today that leaves people at risk.
Every single oil well that isn't properly plugged could be polluting your community.
I've come to LA to investigate these hidden wells, many of which are over 100 years old. So there's just like oil flowing in the streets of the neighborhood?
Pretty much right down here. I mean, we are already at disaster level.
Why aren't these wells capped? Who's responsible, and what does their cleanup mean for the future of fossil fuels? So I'm in the Echo Park neighborhood of Los Angeles. It's a working-class Latino community that's rapidly gentrifying. LA's first oil wells were drilled in this very neighborhood. And right now, I'm about to call someone up who found remnants of that oil history on his own property. Roger Mahano is the landlord of this house. Hey Roger, how's it going? I'm actually right in front of your house right now. In 2015, his tenants started complaining of a sulfur smell.
Picture a rotten egg and a ton of them being buried underneath your front yard is the best example I could give to you.
That smell, it turns out, was hydrogen sulfide. It's a gas that can cause breathing problems, headaches, and insomnia. Local officials found high levels of that and methane, a highly flammable gas, coming from his property. Roger thought that it might be coming from an old oil well, but the state said that it wasn't their responsibility to find it. So what did you do?
So I decided to take a jackhammer and just try to solve where exactly the source of the smell was coming from.
Roger captured the reveal on camera.
Oil well. Oh, yeah. It looked almost like a coffin at first because it was a concrete lid. I saw a ton of gas being emitted, and I said, okay, you guys wanted a well, here's your well. Now come and fix it.
The state determined that the well was drilled before 1903 and that it was an orphan well, meaning it had never been properly plugged and the oil company that owned it is no longer operating. So the task of plugging it fell to the state. It cost over $1 million to plug that well and another one across the street. As it turns out, those wells were just two of thousands that long ago made LA rich. Before Hollywood put Los Angeles on the map, there was oil. Derricks used to tower over the area's streets and beaches, pumping oil to the tune of hundreds of thousands of barrels per year. By 1930, the LA area was producing a quarter of the entire world's oil supply. One of the most lucrative oil fields was found here, which spans what is now Koreatown to Dodger Stadium and parts of Echo Park. But that oil boom was short-lived. The derricks are gone, and what remains today are over 800 likely orphan wells underground. I'm going on a tour of this part of LA to try to scope out where these orphan wells are. California's Oil and Gas Regulatory Agency, called CalGEM, has mapped the wells online. All of these purple dots are uncapped wells, and the gray ones are wells that have been capped. Like, that's crazy. There are at least 11 uncapped wells on this block underground. There's at least 6 buried around this Vaughn's grocery store. At least 10 wells are buried around the property of this school. They've been idle for over 100 years. 1915, all of these are since 1915. It's wild to be walking around and thinking you're just on normal streets, but knowing that there's uncapped wells right below our feet. And even crazier, the CalGEM map might not even show every well.
How many oil wells we actually have underneath here is really unknown.
This block in Echo Park was littered with oil derricks at the turn of the century, but today's map appears not to account for every one.
There's 3 oil wells there that are not on the map.
You can see it in the historical picture, but in the current map, it's just not there.
It's not there, because everything was done handwritten, and some things were reported, some things weren't. You know, it was the wild, wild west back then.
But there's like photographic proof of it.
There is, yeah.
Danny Luna and Rosalinda Morales are lifelong Echo Park residents who offered to show me around. Do you think people know what's going on?
No. That's part of our whole goal, is educating, especially the gentrifiers that are moving in, because they're actually quite surprised, and there are no warnings.
The existence of abandoned unplugged wells is actually a plight across the U.S. There are an estimated 2 million strewn across the country in forests, ranches, and backyards. LA may be the densest place they remain. Today, a well is considered properly plugged when it's filled with cement to prevent oil and natural gas from escaping or getting into underground water. But back in the early days, when companies were done with a well, they'd either walk away from it or sloppily plug it.
So oil companies would throw whatever they had and wanted down the well to plug it. Rumors to have things from telephone poles to palm trees to bowling balls.
That's Monica Embray of the Sierra Club. She took me to the site of some of LA's first oil wells, drilled around 1892. The wells haven't produced oil in over 100 years and are unplugged. Now there's a swimming pool above them.
Right now, at this pool and at the neighboring residences here, people are being exposed to toxic pollutants that are coming from this oil well.
According to the LA Department of Public Health, gases from leaking wells are linked to a slew of health problems, and long-term exposure can increase the risk of cancer. Monica says she believes her family members' deaths can be linked to living near Echo Park's wells.
My cousin's cancer, her lymphoma, my grandmother's lung disease are two types of diseases that we know people who live near oil wells have a more highly likelihood of developing.
She says there's a climate risk too. Unplugged wells leak methane at a rate 5,000 times higher than plugged wells. And that's worrisome because methane is a greenhouse gas that's way more potent than carbon dioxide. Today, oil companies by law are responsible for plugging the wells they operate. On top of that, they have to pay into a state bond to cover the costs of plugging orphan wells. But there's not nearly enough funds for that. So Monica also thinks the state should be doing more.
California's unplugged wells have been left unplugged on average much longer than almost any other state. That is a crime against the people here in California, our communities, but also the climate.
In an email, CalGEM told us they have limited resources for addressing orphan wells. They also said they were unaware of any orphan wells actually leaking in Echo Park. But wells often don't seem dangerous until it's too late. In 1985, a Ross department store exploded after methane accumulated from what may have been a leaking well. 23 people were injured. In 2004, an orphan well spewed 300 gallons of oil in a nearby city. And in 2019, neighbors captured this on video, a huge geyser of oil, sand, and water erupting into the air as workers were plugging an old well. All of this has some Echo Park residents even more concerned, especially as the neighborhood undergoes gentrification and rapid development.
We have these developers literally constructing on top of uncapped oil wells, and there's a danger there. There's a buildup of gases, there could be an explosion, there could be an underground fire.
Danny and Rosalinda grew up amid the remnants of the area's oil boom. Rosalinda attributes her lifelong asthma to it. Now, they fear more disasters are inevitable as new housing goes up.
The residents don't know what's going on. The developers don't want to deal with it. Nobody wants to take on this big issue, which is happening in our neighborhood. So we're being neglected, and it puts us all at risk.
The state has downplayed the risk of orphan wells, saying most of them have existed without incident. But a former CalGEM official told us building over any well increases the risk to the structure, and that the worst-case scenario is catastrophic damage to the building, possibly resulting in injury and death. Developers in LA are responsible for plugging any orphan well they find on a property before they start building. But Rosalinda and Danny are worried that they're missing some or are doing a poor job of plugging the ones they do find.
In 2019, we had an oil spill that was provoked by these constructions. You can hear them in the background right now.
Their fears were confirmed when 10 barrels of oil leaked from an old well as workers were trying to plug it.
It went down like 6 city blocks and got into the water shelf. The stench was horrible in the whole area.
What did it smell like?
Like petroleum and methane.
So there was just like oil flowing in the streets of the neighborhood?
Pretty much right down here.
This is a really kind of dangerous place to live in Echo Park, Los Angeles.
Right.
Developers did not respond to our requests for comment. Danny says it's hard to get answers or accountability from anyone.
It's literally a political hot potato. It goes from one side to the other, and it just gets bounced around all over the place.
That's something we experienced in our reporting too as we tried to get answers from various agencies. The Regional Air Quality Board said that orphan wells are not part of regular inspection. They referred us to the LA County Oil and Gas Strike Team. They in turn referred us to the LA County Office of Oil and Gas, who referred us to the county supervisor working on the issue. She told us that resolving this problem is difficult because of how many jurisdictions this issue ends up crossing. Like this agency that for decades never had a full-time supervisor. The current supervisor told us they don't perform well inspections. She said that falls to the LA Fire Department. This department also referred us to the fire department, which never returned our request for comment. Neither did the mayor's office nor the city councilman who represents Echo Park. What do you think this says about how the city cares about the health of its residents?
They don't.
Especially the ones in this area. They don't care about it. You know, there's primarily a Latino neighborhood. You know, we're just being forgotten.
There have been some recent victories. The LA County Board of Supervisors plans to end oil extraction in parts of the county, but Danny is worried about what happens after drilling stops.
Everybody wants the visual of the jack to go away, but you know, the oil wells are still on the ground. What's gonna happen with those properties, you know, 20, 30 years down the line when a developer sees, oh, there's this nice beachfront property that had thousands of oil wells underneath it, and nobody thinks about that.
If you had the option to move out of this neighborhood, would you?
No, this is my home. I mean, I want to see it cleaned up. Why should I uproot myself? I choose to fight for my neighborhood and my community because I want a cleaner future for the future generations.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Did you know that oil production was alive and well in California? Check out my previous video where I went to the county that produces most of the state's oil, and I even went to a small town celebration of oil. You don't want to miss that, and let me know what you thought of this video in the comments.